Hey guys, I'll just do that. Go. There we go. That's better. So I've been meaning to make this video for a while because it's important that we start having this conversation surrounding AI at this point in time, because it's getting to a point where it's starting to scare a lot of people, and it already was. And we're perfectly honest, this has been happening since long before today, and it's scary. It's a scary thing, because whether we want to admit it or not, if you take a step back and you look at technology as a whole and how it's developed over the many years that we've started to industrialize in modern society, the end game for businesses, when you think of I am a business and I want to develop a product or a service, it's always been how can we get this done as efficiently as we can whilst reducing human cost. That's it. That's been the name of the game. And it's been happening for a long time. And the reason it scares us is because we are aware of what it meant for our parents and our parents' parents to be replaced with automation. It was around 1970 to 1980 that we started hearing stories of fantastically skilled people who spent their entire lives just working with their hands and perfecting their craft, just lose everything that they spent literal decades working towards because their companies found a cheaper, better, faster alternative that made their existence and whatever company they were in irrelevant. Like, I remember many years ago I used to work for this CNC place, and their entire business was we're going to CNC parts and make whatever it is that our clients require, just because that's what they needed, and they were the only company in our area that really did it on the scale that they were doing it. But a lot of the parts they were making required the use of this really old school lathe. I never really knew how old it was, but judging by the sheer scale of it and the fact that it was like bulky cast iron, I would not be surprised if it was like World War II, World War One era World War One or World War Two era lathe. And this is a big motherfucker. Like, this is something that, like, every time it's spun apart for someone to do lathe work on it, it vibrated the entire workshop. I'll say that much. Like, you could feel it run from the other side of the workshop just because of how violently it shook. And the guy who was running it, because it was one of those ones that was so old that there was no real safety mechanisms in it. Like, because I was on a separate machine at the time that was a retrofitted wood lathe for just cutting out poles for scaffolding, and he was telling me all about it. He said, like, he told me all about the guy who run it, and like the only reason it had like a cage on it is because health and safety regs at the time just mandated that they have some sort of a safety feature just to keep him safe. But the most they could do was put like a cage over it, and that was it. And that wouldn't have done much. Like, what you need to realize is that this part, this machine spun parts with such force that if it decided one day to, I don't know, not hold on to the part and then spit it out, it would rip the cage off of the machine itself, shoot through the roof, and then and then come back down through the roof in the warehouse that was about 20, 30, 40 meters away. Or it would just shoot straight through the wall of our warehouse into that warehouse and then out the other side. Like, it wasn't a gentle machine. So the skill that goes into running that machine is huge. And the reason he was the only person who was allowed to run it is because he was the only person who knew exactly what the machine was going to do purely off of the vibrations in the ground. Like, I shit you not, this guy could set the machine running, walk away, and from the other side of the warehouse he could tell, like, oh, the machine's doing ... I mean, he never would, but he could if he wanted to. That's just how skilled he was. And I went in there, I think it was a couple months back, because I was working with another client as a casual laborer, and his entire area was replaced with about half a dozen other machines, and he was nowhere to be found. And it just goes to show that automation, it doesn't give a shit how skilled you are. It really doesn't. If your entire job can be replaced with 3 machines, it really only needs one guy to run it, they'll do it. They'll replace you. Like, they will spend thousands on hundreds of thousands of dollars to replace you. Because that's how much businesses are focused on reducing human costs. Because when you look at running a business at any level, be it small, medium, enterprise, they are focused so heavily on reducing human costs that they don't care if you're in a union or not. They will get rid of you. And that's a real fear that was felt around that 1970 to 1980 era of industrial warehousing and manufacturing. And what's concerning is ever since then, that's eked out into many different areas. I'm like entire suites of people who spent their lives learning how to do complex arithmetic for NASA were replaced with mainframes. You have people in warehouses who were really good at, like, you know, making sure that your packages got out on time, and all they were doing were handling packages by hand, replaced with robots. In fact, forklift drivers, I never thought I'd see the day, but they've been replaced with AI-controlled forklifts. And you could go on and on and on into multiple different industries around just how automation is just getting rid of jobs. And the reason I bring up automation specifically is because I'm trying to phrase this in a way that I can condense down to not basic, but like a basic level of understanding of a very complex topic. Let's see. When you look at technology and how it's applied to automation, you were never really able to get rid of the human factor. All you were really doing was having it where, you know, you could have one person in control of like 4, 5, 100, half a dozen other machines that took over the jobs of like an entire team of people, but the human factor was still there. And when you look at how technology has developed and how computers have creeped into automation, the end goal always was to figure out a way to have it where the human didn't even need to integrate with automation, but you could just have it where the computer could by itself, under its own steam, be told, we need you to make this part, we need you to use these tools, go. That's been the end goal. And when our parents and their parents warned us about robots taking over and coming for our jobs, we never really took it seriously until people started developing the final piece of that puzzle, which was artificial intelligence. And it's a scary thing, even at its base level, like Neurosummer, for example. Just basic bits of code that one guy from Britain had been developing for, like, a long time, originally to just play Osu. That's it, just like to automate the whole process of playing Osu, has developed and evolved to a point where it is now the #1 Twitch streamer. Just, like, that's not a question at this point. Like, if he wants to, he can prompt Neurosummer to get to a point where it has the #1 hype train month on month for the rest of this year, and it can achieve that goal off of one prompt, and it can do it entirely by itself. Like, it has evolved to that point. Like, think about it. What's originally a position where only creative people thrived has now devolved to a point where they've completely eliminated human creativity. Like, that's not a joke. That's not like a boogeyman thing. That is something that has happened 2 times now. Like, in recent memory, she or it, or whatever you want to refer to Neurosummer as, has broken the hype train record. Like, that's a fact. And that's a scary thought. And that's just one example of how AI is just replacing the human element in jobs. And that scares a lot of people, and it should. Because when you are someone who goes to a company and you say, I want to work for you, how do you justify your worth against a piece of software that can do your job with no sleep, that can literally operate 24/7 compared to your 8 to 5? Like, that's not something that you can do. You can't argue against that unless you are the person programming that AI and maintaining it. How do you rock up to McDonald's, for example? And this is something that is actually happening, mainly in Asian countries, where they're getting to a point to replacing the need for someone to make fried rice, for example. Like, if McDonald's tomorrow were to say, we're replacing our entire kitchen staff with automation, like, how do you go to McDonald's and say, I want to work for you and this is what I want per hour and these are the hours I want to work? How do you do that when they can replace their entire staff with a machine that can run 24 hours a day? Like, how do you do that? You don't, and that's what scares us. And what's really annoying is when it comes to AI existing in the creative space, when we talk about creating pieces of art like music, cinema, pictures, stories, what concerns us is the way that AI is trained isn't really that well regulated. Like, I'll give you a couple of examples of how it's trained. In a basic sense, and this is, again, reducing a very complex thing down to a very basic level so that people can, understand without going too deep into it. AI, as we understand it, is human mimicry. It is the idea that we can program it to mimic human interactions. Where it gets scary is AI has beneath it what's called machine learning. So at the bottom level, you have AI, which is like a program mimicry. Like, it's not truly thinking for itself. It's just being told, when you receive this response, you respond. When you receive this input, you respond in this way. What machine learning does is that you can feed it books of information, which are called models, and then it can either learn with your supervision how to respond to that information, so that when it receives input, it doesn't have to rely purely on how it's been told to respond. It can go, okay, I've received like this model, and based I've received this model, this book of information on how to respond to someone's query, and based on a question that they asked me, is this how I'm supposed to respond to that query? That's what's called supervised machine learning. And over time, when you supervise it and say, yes, this is how you respond, no, this is how you don't respond, and it will learn and get more accurate based on where you're telling it to go. It's very much like raising a child, in an abstract kind of way. Then you have what's called unsupervised learning, which is the exact opposite. As opposed to you feeding it books, feeding it models of information that it learns from, so that it can respond to input, as opposed to you supervising that process of, here is a model, learn from it, this is how you respond. You take a step back and you don't course correct it at all. It's just whatever model you receive, and then however interpret it, and then however that AI interprets it should respond based on those models. It's going to make up its entire learning process by itself, and that has very, very wild and unpredictable responses. Now, you might be thinking I'm talking about Tay AI, which, if you don't know, Tay AI is a artificial intelligence created by Microsoft many years ago that was largely designed to respond to messages sent to it over Twitter. That wasn't strictly unsupervised learning. Based on research that I've done, that's what was called semi-supervised learning, which is a hybrid of, you feed it these books, these models of information, and then it learns by itself how to respond to messages based off of the models that you've given it. And then every so often Microsoft will come in and then it will course correct it and say, no, you don't do this. But that's very, very, very occasionally, and it's not as direct, it's not as hands-on as supervised learning. The unfortunate part about it is there were so many people interacting with Tay AI that it just eventually went off the rails. But the idea that you can feed it models or books of information on how to respond to queries is what scares people, because this was many years ago that this was being talked about, that this was being developed as a way to develop machine learning so that AI itself could evolve. What concerns us now is AI has been developed, AI in conjunction with machine learning has been developed to a point where you don't need to necessarily feed it models of information for it to completely replace creative people. What you can do is, as opposed to feeding it, say, like books and books of information, what you can feed it works of art, like pictures, songs, movies, stories, and you could say, I want you to create the next big rap song, and it can do that. There are AI out there that have the capability to create a song in any genre based purely off of one text prompt. And the reason that annoys creative people is because AI has to be trained. It has to be fed models, books of information for it to learn how to do that. And the only way that can happen is if you go out there and then you find pieces of art for it to look at, for it to observe, for it to copy. And that's what pisses creative people off, because it's learning off of their art, it's learning off of their hard work, and they don't know how to protect themselves from that. Because by and large, AI isn't regulated heavily enough in that respect. Like, if I were to go up to, say, just to give you an example, Baby No Money, and I were to recreate his song and then claim it as my own, like, everyone would go, well, hang on, no, that's copyright theft. And yeah, you'd be correct. But when you think of AI, if it were to create something very, very similar to that, or it were to learn off of that, and if it were to learn off of that and then create something else, even if it's not completely recreating that, the question that no one seems to be able to answer is, well, hang on, you've stolen my work to train your AI to create a product that created profit for you. how do I then get compensation for that? Because without my creative work, your AI would not be able to do that. And it's conversations like that surrounding artificial intelligence specifically for creatives that haven't been answered. We don't yet have the laws to combat that. And while there have been a non-zero amount of companies that have realized that's a bit fucked, it's still not stopping. And even if it were to stop that, creators realize that they're not very well liked by big companies. Like, yes, they are capable of creating these great big wonders, but that great big wonder comes at a cost. And companies don't like that. Like, every single artist who has created a creative piece of work for a company has faced backlash, and maybe not directly or indirectly, but they have been in never-ending fights with companies because companies don't like to pay the background people like what they're worth based on the input that they put into a creative piece of work. Like SAG-AFTRA, for example, has been fighting against this for a long while because they're on the front lines of this more than anyone, and they have seen a massive shift in industry where creative companies like Paramount or massive production studios actually work into their contracts. Yes, you are going to create works for us, but we retain the right to feed your works into our AI so that we can train it to effectively replace you. It's not the specific wording of their contracts, but the wording of the contracts is such that we are going to feed your creative works to our AI and there's nothing you can do about it. So that it can, because we want it to learn how to replace your job. And it's been fighting against that for literal years at this point. And what's concerning is they don't have any real ability to fight against that. I mean, there are people actively fighting against that, but like, there's like, sorry, something went down the wrong hole. But what should concern people is when you have enough money to develop AI, and you've developed it to a point where it can learn off of people's creative works to create a piece of media that people will enjoy, it is more cost effective for a company to replace someone than it is to pay a room full of writers to write an entire script for a movie. And that scares the shit out of screenwriters. That scares the shit out of people who aren't directly on the screen like participating in a story, much like an actor or a background actor is. And you might think, well, okay, well, the actors themselves, they're safe. Nope. Not even fucking close. Do you want to know how I know that? Fast and the Furious. Brian was brought back from the dead with, like, CGI. CGI is computer-based, and it's not going to take long for computers to be able to replace an entire cast with one prompt. See, we've got the script writing down, we've got the audio down, we've got production down, because guess what? An entire production team can be replaced with AI. It's not at a point where it's, like, you know, AAA movie ready, but, you know, it's not that far off either. So it's also not that far off for them to do a 3D render of an artist, because people are already doing that on small scale as well. There's a Sorry, I just burped. There's a creator that lives right across the ocean from me in Australia. He creates occasionally 3D renders of little bits of animations purely off of prompts to save him time, so that he doesn't have to pay an artist to go through the process of rendering that in 3D form. Smart move, cost effective, but it also shows that it's possible to create video based off of a prompt. So let's take a step back and look at what we've done. We've shown an example of how an entire production facility can be replaced with artificial intelligence. We've shown how Creative people are having their works stolen for the purposes of training AI to replace them. And, like, it's scary. It's scary because we realize that the warning from that our parents gave us, that our parents' gave us about robots taking over our jobs, was the smallest scale warning of what is a much bigger issue that everyone is facing. Not just people in manufacturing, not just people in creative works, but office staff, anything that requires a computer really, can have an AI developed in conjunction with an appropriate machine learning to make it so that the human factor in any business is no longer relevant. And when we as people are faced with that, when we are faced with the cost effectiveness of having software replace us and being able to operate 24/7 without having to be paid beyond, general maintenance of running an artificial intelligence and supporting the infrastructure that, allows that to run effectively, in a post 1970, 1980 world, in a post 2008 financial crisis world, in a post COVID world, even, when we have been made violently aware of how little we truly mean to companies when the chips come down, faced with the real possibility that computers can replace us, the fear isn't this is possible. The fear is, once this happens, if this happens on scale, on any scale, what's left of the rest of us? Because there is not a person in the world who is smart enough, clever enough, fast enough to walk up to a company and have their entire job replaced by a box of beeping lights and software to be able to justify an hourly rate, holiday pay, sick leave, overtime, training costs, stay away allowances. There is not a person in the world that can bring that up to a company and say, hire me now, when they're replaced with something that's not even a third of their annual cost. And that is a very scary proposition. And I think, in combination with AI stealing creative works, in combination with AI steamrolling the human factor out of companies, and with us realizing just how much reach it truly has, we need to start having the conversation around how we can protect the human factor. Because if we don't have that conversation now, if we don't start having those conversations with our statesmen, our lawmakers, business owners, investment firms, we are going to get to a point where it is a very real possibility that the already unstable job market will get much, much, much worse. Like, if you think it's hard to get a job now, wait till your entire position is replaced with a server rack, as well as everyone else's position. And I think that's what we need to do. We need to start having those conversations. Because this isn't, tinfoil hat talk. This isn't like, oh, maybe it will happen one day. This is happening right now. And right now is when we need to have those conversations. Anyway, my name is Pop-Tart. Thank you for watching this video. And I hope this gave you some insight as to into what AI is, and more specifically why it's so scary for people who work for a living. I hope this encourages you to have these conversations. If you are at all fearful, or if you're concerned, or if this leaves you with any level of dread, note that wasn't my intention, but there are resources out there that will give you counseling, oftentimes free. If you're at all concerned and you need someone to talk to, hop on Google, search My Country Mental Health Hotline, and it should link you to a relevant service. But that's all for me. That's all I'll say on this. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.